As I'm going to read a story, I always one thing reminded me of something of very long time ago, which I think, as looking at the people here, you all remember it. You remember a thing on the radio many years ago. It was called "Listen with Mother."
Oh, yes.
We all read that.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
That's the thing. And I thought I would use that this morning, but I thought maybe not. But do you remember that? Do you remember the name of the woman who used to do it, Roger?
No, afraid not. I didn't watch it myself.
She was a relative of ours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, lived in the Lake District.
Joyce
Her brother
Grenville?
still maintains contact with her son.
Yeah.
Not Joyce Grenville.
No.
No.
It
In a Joyce, but not Grenville.
no,
Definitely not.
she was called Daphne Oxenford.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah.
what a wonderful surname. Hello, I'm Oxenford. Really?
Yeah. I can't get this right. Sorry.
Anyway, as it's 11:05, I will begin that. Today, I'm going to read you a short story, and it may last about half an hour. Think about that, But it's quite remarkable. I found it, when I read it, I thought, wow. It is set a few years in the future, and it's called The Green Ship. Here we go. There it is, down there, land, Billy yelled, nearly falling off the dinghy. We all looked in the direction she indicated with her arm. The waves that had shaken us for some 100 hours didn't jolt so much as her words. We couldn't feel her legs or move a muscle, tangled one on top of the other. We were groggy from hunger and thirst. Mua, sitting next to me, hugged her baby closer. The three guys in the front exchanged a hopeful smile. Meanwhile, Hamza, who came to Benghazi after crossing the Bamako Desert, shook his hand. It can't be Italy. We're still far. We looked at each other anxiously. Someone had fainted. To revive him, we had to smack his face. It wasn't a boat that we had navigated in, but a coffin. He's right, said Professor Kim Ismail, an ex-radio host from Nairobi. The outline is too simple. It's not the coast. Nobody said it. Nobody said anything else because nobody dared pronounce the name that for some weeks we had circulated. The Mediterranean southern coasts. A dark and continuous line occupied the horizon from Otario in Italy, arriving in Oakham in Alabama, smooth and unassailable. The bulkheads of a Navy blockade rose from 30 meters into the sea's waves. Assembling each thanks to the ship's container full of carbon, but impossible to climb or to break down. They represented a monetary solution, even though they were those who would call it a defensive deterrent to immigration towards Europe and the sea. They said this port was free, Bitty shouted. They lied, Hamza said, almost in a whisper. Maybe not. I have barriers that can be 3D printed overnight. The same bulkhead couldn't have been between Palatina, Limpeosa, and Malta to force boats to turn round or follow long, expensive routes, the professor said. Lily rubbed her temple with her fingers. Every border depressed her, and getting closer to the wall erected for the sole purpose of separating international and domestic waters discouraged her even further. With her life savings, she'd cross with me the borders of Kenya, Sudan, Libya, before attempting the Benghazi crossing. Why didn't they tell us? Muti said. Nobody felt like answering such a naive question. They want to cauterize boats to navigate checkpoints, the professor said. And then what?
Does anyone know where the noise is coming from? Because we all see, it looks like we're all muted.
Sorry, I was unmuted for a moment. I don't know how that happened.
Oh, right, it must be that. So sorry.
That. Some black spots from which far away looked like seagulls revealed themselves to be surveillance drones activated by the boat's movement, detected by satellite. I've heard about those and others using the mountains to secure Europe's land borders. Soon they circled over us like vultures. With a smooth air, with a solemn air as she were about to declare war on the world, Bidty rose to her feet, swaying as she grasped my back so as not to fall, and said, "We've all lived through these things, and we shouldn't have lived through, and we better not forget. I'm not turning back. Those drones are informing somebody. They'll come and take us. Doctors Without Borders, NGOs, the Coast Guards." 4 hours later, 132 of us were saved. I was 17 years old, and my life was contained in a backpack, a bar of soap, smartphone and charger, a sports jersey, named number 10, a photograph of my mum and brother. They all told me that I had a narrow head, pointed chin, quick eyes, black like tar, like my dad. I was 17 years old, and my life had been spent in a refugee camp since we arrived at Dadaab from Nairobi. I hadn't seen anything but tents, dust, fences and gates. Soft clouds glided over the sea that night. The stars would disappear, and the moon would be illuminated as all of any other silhouette, and appeared to divert the way of their gazes and their lives. That's an aircraft carrier, Lodi asked. The immense structure stood out in the dark water. I don't know, I said, as she drew herself near me. The lapping of the waters had worn down her combative temperature. Someone took a picture, but in the high seas, there wasn't a strong enough signal to transfer anxiety into hope. It could be a military ship charged with bringing us back to the darker side of the Mediterranean. But instead, a man who drew near us on a lifeboat with 4 sailors told a different story. "Welcome," he said in English. He had blonde hair tied back in a ponytail, pronounced nose and lips, smile sincere but strained. My name is Sergio Torrentini, and that, he pointed, is the green ship. We take in anybody who needs help. The sailors threw us water bottles. Hansa grabbed my sleeve and asked me to translate. I was one of the few on board, along with the professor, who knew some English besides Swahili. When I was little, I listened to his show, Indie Reggae Beats and Rocks, on Radio KenyaAmore.com, and knew hundreds of songs by heart. We don't want a board. We want Europe, I said dryly, gesturing at Hansa to show Sergio who from the words came. He didn't answer right away, but instead tossed us a line, that beauty caught in the air. Europe doesn't want you, he continued bitterly, and they don't care if you're escaping from hunger or war, if you live in a refugee camp, or if your children, grandchildren will be born and grow up in their prisons, he said sharply. Where do you come from? I heard the names of camps I knew, like Dabadar, Nuragesi, Bokalamu, and others I ignored, like Ufa, Sariati, and Mhashra. Besides, this isn't a boat for transit, Sergio said. So you're bringing us back to send us to a centre for identification and deportation, I translated for Mura, who lifted the bundle with her son inside. No deportation. The Green Ship is a humanitarian project for rescuing political refugees and climate migrants. If you're not bringing us back, you're not going to Europe. Where are you going? The professor asked. He was the only one to reason with his head, not his heart. Sergio and the other sailors were already throwing lines to us and to ease the transport to their lifeboat. Board and you'll see. Once we boarded, Sergio asked. Nobody else? We looked at each other without the courage to respond. Then the professor said, in the hold there are 2 cadavers. They died 2 days ago. They started to stink. We had to leave them at sea to lighten their load. Their names? We were silent. Sergio added 2 crosses to the list of 123. From the parapet, I observed the wake of boats in transit in the Aegean Sea. A Greek ferry, 2 cargo boats, a cruise ship. Who knows how many immigrants were hiding like cargo in the holds? The others were still sleeping among the trees. And they were not alone. Hundreds of strangers were camping in sleeping bags and tents. And below, thousands were squashed into the bunks. Yesterday evening, I didn't see anything because I quickly laid down to rest. But now, by the light of the dawn, things were appearing more clearly. Gamble, Sergey said in Swahili, offering me a cup of coffee. Jambo, and thank you for picking us up, I said, taking a sip. Did you sleep? It's not easy after being on a dinghy. He must have experience with migrants speak like that. Little and poorly. Later, we'll have a soccer game with everybody. Would you like to join? I nodded yes. And he convinced me to tell him about our games in Nairobi. Two things were important for me: survival and playing soccer. Then it became only one when men from the El Shaba came to the field where my brother Noor and I were playing. They scolded us because we wore short socks and played with a ball. Soccer was a decadent pastime for them, like alcohol, cigarettes, and film. But Noor and I played it just the same, hiding. Our games ended when the bombs dropped. I took the jersey from my backpack. Here, you can play without anybody saying anything to you. I gave him the empty coffee cup. This ship is really odd. It was his turn to tell me something. According to international law, it's not a ship, but a micronation. First, it was a bioconservation project funded by the United Nations. A bit like the seed deposits in the Norwegian Svalbard Islands. Ever heard of it? I shook my head. Then it was converted to manage the immigrant crisis in the Mediterranean. 3 hills in the middle of which ran a stream recreated microclimates: temperate, desert, and Mediterranean. Excuse me. My gaze wandered to the Mediterranean habitat, where tens of drones hurried around like birds that watered leaves, cut branches, checked flowers, and collected pollen, while some gardeners oversaw the operation to maintain everything green. Then, in the middle of the eucalyptus grove, I saw an impressive sequoia, its fronds shading half the ship. The habitats, Sergio continued, are protected by geodesic cupolas, 150 meters tall. Fresh water comes from a desalinator, powered by solar energy. In the meantime, Peter had woken up and joined us. How did you manage to create all this? She asked, as if she'd woken into a dream. While I translated, Sergio showed us around the park. The professor noticed us and joined up. His background as a radio journalist got the better of his sleeplessness. When he wasn't on the air with indie reggae beats and rocks, he edited a feature on technology. We brought an abandoned aircraft carrier and we modified it through crowdfunding project. The hull belongs to Vergarius, an aircraft carrier, the same class as the Admiral Khrushchev, launched in 1988 in Russia. In 2004, it was rebaptized Lianyun and sold to China to become a floating theme park. Like Disneyland, but luckily it didn't happen. We bought it for a token price to make a botanical garden. Ours is a scientific project approved by the United Nations, though now We're a more public transit for migrants, so Jay said with a laugh. The ship flew its own flag, a sequoia styled green on a hull over a white background. We can host 7,000 people. We grow crops and raise livestock. We have the internet and 3D printers for any needs. Do you want to bring all refugees abroad? I asked jokingly, rather like Noah's Ark. Impossible. You need 100 ships, said Beauty, added. And that's only to evacuate the camp in Dalabar. In fact, we have another plan. When the time is right, we'll head towards India and the southern seas. Somebody won't like that situation, said the professor. Hanser and some of the other guys had boarded reluctantly. They continued to complain about wanting only Europe. Excuse me, just go. Finding the end bit. Once they felt better, they had to decide whether or not to retry their journey. We had to save them, let them know the risks. Streaks of lightning invaded the northern sky from the Indian hinterlands, and the clouded front advanced slowly, like a wounded animal with its head swaying. The weather walked ahead, rumbling and hiding every ray of sun. Lights descended on the water after flashing around in incandescent segments. Many of us retreated to the tents to safely enjoy the spectre of light, water, and wind, while others ran through the torrential rain, refreshing themselves with songs and laughter. Muma played with her son, alive thanks to the fact that he'd never been removed from his mother's breast, from which he managed to suck every drop of milk she could manage to produce without dying of dehydration. But the celebrations were interrupted when a man came down the bridge with a megaphone in hand. Attention! Attention! They've detected a sea quake. Time for action at time for impact in 4 minutes. A sinister light whitened the sea, bitterly cold into me. It'll never end. Even the sea has it in for us. Would you have preferred to do as Hamza and his friends did? No, they're crazy to return to Somalia and retry the hopeless journey. By what end will they meet? They said they wanted to retry, but their eyes said otherwise. We'll meet a better end. We'll meet a better end, I'm sure of it. In the middle of the rolling waves, 4 meters tall, they battered the ship's hull. Along another appeared. It occupied all the horizon, and judged by the distance, it must have been 3 times as high. Visibility lowered, and a wall of water, misty with gusts of wind, rustled the branches of the floating forest. The pitch already agitated every time the ship sank into the gulch of the waves, becoming insupportable. Songs and screams become complaints and curses. Those who danced before now grasped onto something and tried not to vomit. The clamour escalated, an uproar of wind, pounding of water, a vibration like a drum roll beat the charge. despite the 500-meter length and its scary tonnage, even the green ship suffered from the forces of nature. When the tsunami washed over us into every pore, nerve, and muscles of their body, Victory licked her lips, trembled with fever and emotion, and kissed me on the lips. Once the storm ended, lights appeared on the horizon. When we were all closer, I made out numerous boats linked together by a series of ropes and jetties. Together, they all formed a type of flotilla, even. Sorry about that. None of us had any idea where we arrived, even though the assembly in the high seas didn't seem to be our final destination. To find the answer, I went to Sergio, who was on the phone. Where and when did it happen? He was asking somebody. A joy appeared on his face, as if he'd just discovered that he'd become a father. How big is it? He walked back and forth, unable to contain his mysterious happiness. Yes, definitely. Send me a scan and the coordinates. I'll inform the flotilla. Once he hung up, Sergio grabbed me by the shoulders. We've been blessed. Nature is building your new home. A new home? The sea quake. It opened a fault line underneath the ocean from which magma is pumping out. Are you bringing us into a volcano? No, but as soon as the magma cools, we can claim the island that is emerging from the sea. Now we too have something to teach nature. Then, with the flotilla, we think of the rest. The rest, it's just going to be rock. Yes, at first. It'd be uninhabitable. But we will terraform it. I turned my gaze from Sergio's satisfied face to the geodesic cupulas. Tree, pollen, and mushroom spores floated around, carried by the ocean breeze. The green ship took the lead of the flotilla. Seen from above, it might have looked like a school of fish migrating from the sea for the season, and we were part of that flow. The sign posted on top of their new land had been modified by a change in an N into a D, and it was transformed from no man's land to no mad land. As the media had hastened to rebaptize the newly born microcosm. The islet where Sergio had first planted the flag in his haste, called No Man's Land, to underline its independence from whoever wanted to claim the territory in time, because No Man's Land was for us. A place accessible without a passport, entry visa, or residence permit. A land designated to welcome people instead of turning them away. I like the wordplay of no man's land and no mad, having grown up in a refugee camp between walls and gates. I'd been free of those limits, and I'd left all the borders behind. Because borders, political or mental, are temporary obstacles. Because only those who have been turned away or who had enough of immigration and empathy of others, know how to appreciate the value of hospitality even. The accidental but highly probable birth of this island in the middle of the Indian Ocean was followed by a phase of movement of thousands of tons of sand from the adjacent seafloor. Thanks to pumping systems and aspirated sand, provided construction material for 5 enormous 3D printers. 2 of them aboard tankers employed the same technique that the Dutch used to tear the ponders from the North Sea, creating dikes of natural material to protect the central atoll. Yet different from the ponders, the architects supported the project had thought up of a porous artificial structure that acquired to host marine life over the course of centuries would in part replace the immediately damaged Great Barrier Reef. The other printers focused on terraforming the cooling magma, rich with fertile substances. They mixed it with sand from the seafloor. It took us 6 months before we could set foot on nomad land. To our touch, the ground was not hard, but instead it seemed supple and ready to be cultivated. Under an orange sky, a carpet of yellow narcissus welcomed Bitty and I. The air smelt fresh, and the land emulated a narcotic warmth, stronger than the truma that Norrie smoked in the camp at Debar. The coronas of the flowers reached Binty's bare knees, and I filled myself with the smell of the narcissi transplanted to the island from the green ship months ago. Do you know why I like it here? She asked as she laid down. I shook my head. Because we're all immigrants from somewhere. If you think about it, Dublin was also like that. But it's prettier here, she said, a smile showing no disappointment. We need to. I stared at her frail ankles. The first time I saw her at the refugee camp, she and 2 other girls were chatting while pumping water from a well. Each filled 3 jugs, 2 to carry by hand and 1 to balance on top of their heads. They were 3 queens, models, who strutted on dirt roads as if they were high fashion runways. She wore a long coloured skirt, scarf on her head, earrings, coordinated makeup, hair in tiny, neat braids. Her balance gait was perfect, her gaze ahead noble, full of nonchalance. She strolled with her own light, starved with a black skin that emulated a supernatural aura as she passed, wiggling her hips between trash barrels, plastic waste, mismatched shoes, rusty pipes, and goats that grazed anything they could find. We made the whole trip together. Sometimes, like in Sudan, I feared that she wouldn't be able to make it, like when we had to bribe a guy on the borders, or when she was hurt while we were crossing an area mine-laned by the Boko Haram terrorists. But more than anything else, I feared for her life that night when two traffickers cornered her after realizing her beauty. She tried to defend herself to stop the violence. She shouted for help, crying, "Sardinia! Sardinia!" But nobody moved for fear of being thrown into the sea for defending her. In the end, I couldn't stand it. I grabbed one of them by the neck and I flung him off the boat. The other kicked my back, grabbed my shirt, and lifted me off the ground. I too would have ended up in the water had it not been for the professor, whose strong hands freed me from the grip of the trafficker and then threw him too into the dark water. You're right, Biddy, but unlike WR, besides us all being immigrants, there's something else that makes me love this place. What? That here, if we want, we can emigrate. She took my hands and said in a solemn tone, how it has always been and always will be. Once in a while, I talk with people back in Dabar on the internet. Nobody wants to admit that the refugee camp, provisional since the 1990s, have become a permanent establishment. Not the local functionaries who receive funding to continue operation, nor the United Nations that paid to not solve the problem, not the refugees forced to live there without hope of leaving. I would never want to return there to survive. Imagine a life elsewhere. My elsewhere, like that of many others, has been born from the commitment of all who participated in Nomadland. If we've created a precedent better than Sealand, the Republic of Nineveh, Rose Island, to cite some car cases so Sergio has talked about, who knows what we'll be able to achieve? Who knew if international law would adapt to fundamental necessities of humans? My mother and brother were already on their way to intercept the path of the green ship. The professor climbed down to the inlet and waved to greet us. In his other hand, he held up a parcel with a round object inside. Down there, did you see it? We stood up and followed him until we reached the top of another hill, where there was a second meadow, green and flat. They taught me how to use their 3D printer. White lines were traced on the side of the field. This is my first ball, he said, pulling the object out of the envelope and raised it above his head like a trophy. And then he gave the ball a kick. A soccer goal awaited only us. Now, I don't know about you folks, but I thought that was a jolly good story. Comments, questions, and anything like that?
Thank you very much, Ray. Yes. I was I was a bit puzzled with the end. Like, could you say a bit more about the ending, or should I work harder at imagining what happened?
The end bit was that she was able to play football on that ground, and that was part of the new freedom for her, that she wasn't in the transit anymore, and they were going to build a new
Right.
a society on this on no man's land or nomad land, as they called it, you know. And this was the start of something new, something different.
How long ago was that written?
Hmm?
How long? Sorry, how long ago was that one written? How long ago? Yeah.
It's a new story. I think
Right.
it was written in about. So we get back to it. Yes, this is it's for a volume called "The Best of the World Sci-Fi," and this book is only this book was published in 2012.
That's
So it's written a few years ago. It's written by Francesco Versi, who's from Italy.
right.
Anyway, I read that and I thought, yeah, this could happen. This is only a few years in type of thing, you know. And as we have, you know, people in tiny boats coming across the channel and all this lot.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
just an exaggeration of those tiny boats and could be.
Yes.
It took me shorter than I thought it did, but there you go.
That was really good. I'm sure people want to say things. I don't normally act as chair, and I'm not very good at it. But it's a bit with you being the speaker, I felt obliged to.
Well, you do very well. But there you go. It was. I think it was an interesting concept of, you know, that because I've read about the fact that big boats nowadays and things like this, which want to set themselves up as being a independent country type of thing, floating on the sea, you know. So, you know, kind of like the flotilla, they said, with all these other boats connecting to it, you know, as that type of thing. Because if you go to some of the Chinese ports and things like that, you know, there are kind of hundreds of boats there, and Thailand has got a number, and I don't know about India, but I know there is, you know, kind of enormous flotillas now being used, you know, for that purpose. But
we've got this boat off Weymouth, haven't we? It's perhaps not got this.
yes. But it's an interesting concept, I thought.
Yes.
It's well worth reading. I know I fumbled a bit over the wording, you know, because it's so unusual these days to read into people. I used to be very good at it, you know. But practice, I don't do it anymore.
Well, I used to do a lot of public speaking, but the last time I did any, I didn't think I did well at all, and it was just that I had forgotten how to project my voice and so on, and I was tending to talk to my chest and all these things that you learn not to do. But yeah, you weren't doing that, Ray. Anyway, don't worry. We had a bit of trouble with the acoustics, didn't we? I don't know what happened, but.
Oh, well. Anyway, I liked it.
Yes, yeah, it was really interesting. I'm hoping somebody's going to say something.
Now,
Okay.
can anybody else see this happening?
Cool.
Sci-fi isn't my genre, but I can say something about coming, you know, making your way from Africa to parts of Europe. Then when I was married to my Senegalese husband, several of his relatives, including his sister, would hop over to Gibraltar, hop, and end up being traders in Naples, in Italy, because Italy is much more welcoming of Black people. They just are, or that's what they found. And they would, you know, they would sell their handmade goods and stuff, food, and then they might hop back and hop forward. I don't think passports or anything like that came onto it, and it was it was a route. It was a route.
Yeah, I remember meeting them in Sicily, selling belts on the quayside at the port west of Sicily. I think that Italy is becoming less welcoming now, but it certainly did. There was a big influx of people from Africa.
I think it was, most leaders now in Europe are very right wing, and I think there was a time I'm probably talking about the 80s and 90s, when there were more liberal regimes in various European countries. Maybe.
Yeah, but as the story goes, the fact that you have the countries, so people cannot go to these places, and there has to be a where are all these refugees going to go to? Are they going to be in camps which, as the story said, which start to become permanent, which start to get the feeling of becoming not just a transit camp, which a lot of them were built for, but as nearly as a permanent place.
Well, I've just been reading a book about the last slave ship, which left in 1860. That's why, you steal all the men and all the resources from a continent to enrich white people, and you've left with a problem that actually white-skinned humans have to start taking responsibility in 2024. That's my view, anyway.
Yeah, and it's not going to get easier. The effect of climate change is going to increase economic pressures on some parts of the world, and while there are these enormous inequalities, I mean, we have pretty bad inequality in this country, but it pales into insignificance compared with the inequalities between us and the global South, as it's come to be called, what used to be called the Third World. And the pressures are going to go, they're not going to get any less, shall we put it that way. And the present sort of putting up the barriers is not actually going to solve that problem. And I'm afraid I get pretty depressed about that. It's difficult to see how, I mean, people who say, well, we're pretty crowded on this island. Well, we are, I suppose, but we could organize ourselves better. And the other thing, of course, is that if you just look at the British situation, and I'm sure that it's probably true of many parts of Europe, the demographic structure of our society is such that we're increasingly aged, and we're going to need more and more people to actually do the productive work, as those of us who've been, well, I mean, I've been on pension for, I can't remember, 25 years. I remember my dear distant cousin by marriage, Winchcombe Lansdowne, who some of you will remember. I used to say, you're the reason for my water bills being so high, because you've been taking your pension for so long from British Bristol Water. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. So I don't know what the answer is going to be.
I loved Sue Townsend's book, The Queen and I. It was satire, but maybe the 73-year-old that's got 5 big houses could give up 4 of them. Someone, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly in terms of equality, I must say that I was beginning to feel that my house was too big, and I'm very glad now that I'm able to live only in half of it. I feel very much happier about that. it's a four-bedroom house on my own was not something I felt at all comfortable with, even with just two of us. So once the children had gone, the case for downsizing was substantial. And of course, I live in an area where population density isn't very high. Not much sign of infilling with social housing either, which is a bit of a dilemma.
The Bristol City Council, who are developing the Temple Quay area of Bristol. I looked at one of their statements that said what they're going to be building there, and apparently they're going to build 10,000 houses. But and you think, yes, but how many of those houses will be rent affordable to what I would say in quotes of normal people? Hattie.
The answer is 10%, but of course that will get eroded. And I know because I'm on a group called TQAG, TQAG, Temple Quarter Accessibility Advisory Group. And we're a bunch of people with disabilities, and we ask questions, and we had a session last week where they were explaining things like that. And we talk about accessibility mostly in the environment and the approach to the station. And they're in a development stage now where they are approaching people with questionnaires about what is needed. And unfortunately, the questionnaire they showed us, sorry, I can't remember what it was about, but they had selected students from the university, young people in a sixth form, and someone else. And we just said, this is a valueless questionnaire because you're not questioning a cross-section of the population at all. And they said, well, we had to start somewhere, and these were accessible audiences for the questionnaire. So that was their answer. It's anyway, they are receiving earfuls from us. So we have wheelchair, blind, carers for dementia, deaf, hard of hearing. We haven't got anybody from the autistic spectrum or people with other diagnoses like people who are intolerant of sound and complex visual effects. Anyway, there you go, TQAG.
Well done.
I always remember an old professor of mine who said, about questionnaires, he said, yeah, always write your questionnaire so you get the answer you want.
Yeah, indeed.
Yes. There you go. Me being cynical again. That's Roger.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Hattie, for introducing that element into the housing question. We were starting though on the general question of affordability, and it was useful to have that figure. And as you say, it's likely to get eroded. My impression is that our present mayor has his heart in the right place in that area. Though of course the constraints are enormous, and I don't know quite how well it's working. I have no idea what the figures are. I'm actually quite anxious about what will happen when we no longer have a mayor to drive things in that direction. The prospect of a hung council in Bristol worries me a lot. and it's going to be very difficult to achieve anything very much in that area, and things are going to be increasingly determined by commercial considerations, which I think is a real problem. But we'll see. I may be right. I may be over pessimistic about that. We'll see. But to go back to the where we started on the refugee question, it seems to me that it's desperate that we get our infrastructure organized better so that we're in a better position to absorb people who need to come here. I mean, it's crazy that we have people sitting idle for five years even, when we're desperate for people to work in certain fields. And it's the politics of that are very complicated, and I don't underestimate the difficulties of it, but it does seem to me that the present population needs reassurance, and it can only be reassured if there's a proper attention to developing the facilities and making resources available to people.
I am slightly, I'd say this, I'm slightly greedy in the fact that I'm grown old. I soon will be very old. And
I already am.
But quite. But in that philosophy is that I want lots of people around to look after me. And if you've got all these people who want a job, yes, come and look after people like me.
Indeed.
Because there are not we're vastly short of care staff within the NHS, and even, may I say, though I disapprove of such things, private industry to do the job as well. The numbers are woefully short. And
have you got a big piggy bank, Ray?
Yes, I don't have a piggy bank, I'm afraid. I broke that years ago.
Well, you better get one, a big one.
Yeah.
Anyway, someone was going to say something. Hattie, you was going to say something then, or were you?
Well, my reaction, well, another contribution thing is I've been up to Stoke Gifford Retirement Village a few times now. I go to dances there on a Thursday or Friday night. We had a lovely Burns night last Friday. And people who are living there don't ask me anything about the finances or the arrangements. I've no idea. But people who are living there really, really enjoy it. And there are some very disabled people, and they're all charging about on their electric wheelchairs, and library, billiards, dancing groups, outings, and the concept is absolutely amazing. And at the moment, it's really working out for the people who I've met. So it is outside Bristol city centre. I don't know about the accessibility for people working there. And so far, the people who've been working there that I've bumped into have been very pleasant. However, in the city centre, I know somebody who is housed in a flat in a block, and the block has music on a Wednesday, which is arranged by somebody who I know each week, but I haven't seen any other activities formally advertised. Certainly, some people have got together and play bingo every Friday night, I think. And have a takeaway between them. But I think that, that's informal and not part of the deal, not part of the provision of that particular property, which is run by a trust, and some of the places are rented by the city council on behalf of their clients, or the NHS. So what can you say? I mean, sometimes I think private enterprise probably gets it right. I don't know how long the retirement village will feel good.
there certainly there's a move in the direction of that kind of provision. I mean, there's of course in Westbury run by St Monica's. In York, of course, there's the Quaker one in New Earswick, whose name has slipped my mind for the moment, but I know quite a few people who've gone to live there. But these facilities are not cheap, and that's
Hartridge Oaks, Roger.
Hartridge Oaks. That's the one. Thank you.
Again, Artery goes.
Hartridge Oaks, OAKS, Hartridge Oaks. And I've seen such facilities in New Zealand and in America.
Holland.
It's quite a widespread movement, and the big benefit, of course, is that they provide a range of opportunities, including and a range of facilities, so that you can move on as you need more. You start off in a self-contained little house or bungalow or whatever, or a flat, and then as you become more in need of care, you can move into a care home and then into a nursing home. To have all those in one place is very, very helpful. Avenue House has some degree of that, but obviously limited. They did want to build a dementia unit, but didn't succeed. They didn't get planning permission for it, unfortunately. It would have been a great benefit to that community if they had that facility. And they've got the two different degrees of sheltered housing alongside the care home.
Yeah,
I would certainly see myself going to Avenue House when I can no longer look after myself. I'd be very happy with the community there.
Can I add?
Yeah, do.
My dad was an architect. He preferred furniture design. That's what his company did. But the architectural side, they had running alongside the furniture. And he and his colleagues, Ivor Smith, I don't know if you've heard of him as an architect, developed a village in sort of village concept in Blueberry, which is in Berkshire on the Downs. And that was the same concept in the 70s of townhouses, bungalows, nursing home, all on one site. Quite far-sighted, I think.
I believe that's what the developers wanted to do at Westbury Park, to replace St Christopher's School. But I don't know there was quite a lot of local opposition to it for some reason. And I haven't been able to follow that closely, and I don't know what the latest position is, but it sounded to me quite a good concept, even if there were features of it which made difficulties for the neighbours. Because it's a brilliant site.
I would happily join them there.
Not available to many of us, however.
This is true. Yes. Right then, folks. I think we have come to the natural end. Does anybody else want to speak? Carry on.
I just want to say thank you very much, Ray, for bringing a very unusual angle story to us. You know, a sort of futuristic aspect on refugee ship, and you know, bringing up questions about does it. Well, I mean, when did you say this was written? 2000.
2000, yeah.
Published in
2012.
2012. Sorry, 2012. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Oh, did you? Okay, right. You know, I think well, it was probably written before that if it was published in 2012. And I think we do have to think creatively and out of the box about refugee ship and climate escape and things like that. So thank you very much for opening the box.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's look and see if I've got it right.
A good idea.
Okay. Oh, I was wrong, friends. This book was published in 22.
20,
22.
2022, right? Yeah,
2022,
sounds
right.
a bit more in line with the developments over the last decade.
Yeah.
Anyway,
such an issue.
so the after my slight faux pas there.
It's all right.
Right. Anyway,
Lovely to see you all.
but
I won't be
next week.
next week. I've got family visiting.
Right. Well, I will even say next week, because we have Hattie, who is going to speak to us about Cuba.
And I'm very scared about it.
Oh, I think your
I'm
last
sorry
one
to
was
miss
great.
that, Hattie. As I say, I've got family visiting. from
It's
Germany.
so interesting a place.
It
So
is indeed.
yeah.
Yeah.
It shall be recorded, Roger, so you can watch it.
Yeah, you
Good. Thank you.
Right.
okay.
Bye,
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.